All right, so now we're going to look at some key aggregate demand and supply side factors impacting the economy. It's really important you've got a really good grasp of how some of these key factors can have an impact on the Australian economy, and because we're going to use it throughout your assignment next week. So we're going to look at a range of factors that shift the demand curve, so lead to an increase or decrease in aggregate demand, some factors that can influence supply or shift the supply curve, and then some factors that can have an impact on both demand and supply throughout the economy. So we won't touch on all of these now, but throughout these videos, we'll look at a range of these factors. So that's the same thing, just things that boost in demand, things that boost in supply. So starting with demand side factors, basically when we're looking at a demand side factor, it's things that are going to lead to a shift in the demand curve to the right or the left. And basically what they do is they make us use more of our resources so we get closer to our productive capacity. So when demand shifts from AD0 to AD1, it means there's more demand for Australian goods and services, so we're using more of our available capacity, which leads to increased economic growth. Our supply potential hasn't changed. We're just using more of our available supply because there's more demand for goods and services. And these are things that lead to an increase in exports, consumption, investment throughout the economy. Okay. So first things, real disposable incomes. Basically what that means is your income after you've paid direct taxes, so after you've paid income tax, and it's also adjusted for inflation. It adjusts the figure to see, so it's not as high if prices have gone up, so it gets adjusted based on what's happened to prices. So when you see the word real disposable, two things I want you to say is it's after income tax and it's after adjusting for inflation. And essentially, in terms of the impact on aggregate demand, when real disposable incomes increase, that means that after tax income has increased, which means that households have more purchasing power, which boosts consumption. And that leads to an increase in production because there's more demand for goods and services. So when real disposable incomes increase, people have more money, therefore they spend more, and that leads to increased consumption and aggregate demand. In terms of the impact on employment, basically the increase in consumption means that we produce more to meet that extra demand, and whenever we produce more, that increases what we call the derived demand for labour. So firms need more labour because there's more demand for products in the economy. So we need essentially to make more products, and therefore we need more workers. Okay, consumer confidence is the second one. Basically, when you're looking at consumer confidence, we're talking about households' expectations about their future. So what they think about what their future income is going to be like, what sort of employment opportunities are available, and that determines whether consumers are more willing to spend or save. So it's done as an index score, either above or below 100. And basically, if it's below 100, it means that more people are pessimistic than optimistic. And if it's above 100, it means more people are optimistic than pessimistic. In terms of the impact on aggregate demand and growth, increased consumer confidence leads to increased consumption spending. People's marginal propensity to spend increases whenever there's an increase in consumer confidence. And that's because they're essentially confident in their earning potential, and that encourages them to spend more on goods and services rather than save. That leads to increased aggregate demand, which flows on to increased production, increased jobs, and increased incomes throughout the economy. In terms of the impact on employment, increased consumption generally leads to more production, which then leads to more derived demand for labour. So the key thing here is you mentioned that propensity to spend, which then impacts consumption spending, which impacts demand, which then can flow onto more production. It can also lead to more employment. Business confidence, similar to consumer confidence, but we're looking at the sentiment of businesses, how confident businesses are in their future profitability. Basically, it's dependent on business conditions, so things like how profitable they are, and it's measured by the NAB Business Confidence Index. Basically, it's actually measured as above or below 0 rather than 100, and a measure above 0 means that businesses are generally confident, and below 0 means they're generally pessimistic. In terms of the impact on the economy, higher business confidence. Yeah, so just going on, when business confidence increases, businesses are more willing to invest. They're more willing to expand their businesses, invest in plant and equipment. They're willing to take on more debt, and all of that leads to more investment spending as a component of aggregate demand, and that leads to more aggregate demand throughout the economy and more production as well. The increased investment also creates jobs, which can flow on to more consumption spending because more people have money. So the key thing is that when businesses are confident, they're more likely to invest. When firms invest, they're more likely to hire more people, and that leads to more consumption as well. In terms of the impact on employment, any investment spending will help to reduce unemployment because they'll need workers for that investment. So if they're investing in new infrastructure or they're installing something, that all creates jobs. In the long term, investment can also help to lower our prices because we become more productive, and that can lead to more jobs as well. Overseas growth rates, basically we want other countries to grow as fast as they possibly can. So when we're looking at overseas growth rates, we're looking at growth in countries like China and America and Japan. And basically when there's higher overseas growth rates, it helps to boost the demand for our exports. So when other countries grow and they're investing a lot, so they're investing in roads or railways or infrastructure, then that can lead to increased demand for our commodities like iron ore and coal. And when other countries have higher incomes, so when the people are earning more money, that can increase demand for things like education and tourism and beef and baby formula. So it really depends on what type of growth is occurring. If it's based on investment, then it's more likely to lead to um, more demand for our commodities. If it's based on consumption, then it's more likely to lead to more demand for things like tourism and education, things like that. But ultimately, the key thing is that Australia benefits when other countries grow. In terms of the impact on employment, the increase in demand for many of our exports like tourism and education and coal, that all helps to create jobs in the economy and therefore reduces unemployment. People in those industries also generate higher incomes, which can then flow on to more demand for other sectors. So like the fact that miners, tour guides and all those kinds of people have more money should then flow onto them spending more, which can create jobs in other sectors in the economy. Okay, so you can see here, this is kind of just a graph of Chinese household consumption. So for the dark blue, you can see that since 2000, Chinese household consumption is increasing exponentially. And that's great for Australia because if they're spending more, then they're buying more of our goods and services, and that'll create more jobs and create more growth in Australia. Okay, we'll talk about supply side factors in the next video.